In the last few weeks, there have been numerous examples of large corporations or the government simply offloading decision making to consulting companies or to AI to justify something. And in my opinion, it's to justify not taking accountability for their actions. On Friday, Coles announced that there was a restructuring and there were going to be redundancies. Now, for non-Australians, Coles is one of the largest supermarkets. In fact, in Australia, we would refer to Woolworths or Woolies and Coles to be a duopoly in the supermarket space. Combined, they make up roughly 2/3 of the supermarket capitalization in Australia. So for Coles, what happened is, if we look at this email that was sent out to staff, is that they made use of a consulting company called Essentia. Essentia is going to help them outsource services for Coles, and their justification is that other countries do something similar, whether it be North America or Europe. And they also blame AI. This isn't anything new, and in fact, it's just a trend that we've seen in Australia. Another example that we can see this kind of trend of outsourcing is if we look at the big four banks, which combined probably make up roughly 80% of the market share, all of them use some kind of outsourcing or offshoring, with 3 of them directly hiring their staff for offshoring, and with Westpac using a third party, functionally doing the same thing, just one removed. So what kind of trend am I referring to if we look from a global scale and look about like this change in attitude to accountability? Well, it's not really a change, it's really just a trend rather. So let's have a look. Generally, something happens. There's been many news articles about like Coles and Woolworths price fixing or whatnot, and perhaps this has caused the share price to, well, drop. And with this increased pressure, well, they believe that they can have a mandate to then increase profits and expand. And to do that, they don't make the decisions themselves, right? They always use a consultancy company, or they have some other scapegoat like AI. And what's the consequence of this? Well, the consequence of this is that they have someone to blame now, and they can just make aggressive cuts. And that's exactly what happened with Coles, right? In the Coles scenario, they made anecdotally they made roughly 700 to 1,000 headcount change, whether that's like redundancies or people being reallocated. And the other thing that is also very common that we see is that they say that there is an opportunity for people to reskill. Here, if we read on the second last paragraph on the screen, it says including reskilling opportunities and pathways into other roles across Coles. So we see this language a lot to justify, hey, it's not as bad as we're saying that it is. And it's this kind of like responsibility shifting which is a real concern in my opinion. Now, how has this kind of evolved or affected other industries? So in the US, keep in mind I'm not American, but there is a very recent and very loud news related to the flock safety cameras. And there are many things that I can see parallels to this reliance on, whether it's a third party, a private company from the government or law enforcement agencies, or the reliance on AI that shifts the accountability side or the onus from the law enforcement agencies to now the private citizens. And I think that is one of the many reasons why people are very upset. So if the private company makes a mistake, so let's say that they get the license plate incorrect and they assign it incorrectly to you, that you committed an offense like a speeding ticket or something like that, now you have to appeal not to the law enforcement agency, you have to appeal to the private company, even if they made the mistake. So it changes the onus from the law enforcement agency doing their due diligence to give you the fine to you as a private citizen to then go over to them. And I think that this is this kind of accountability shifting that is the biggest issue in this kind of setup. The companies, law enforcement agencies, government no longer really need to, they're no longer accountable, right? They now shift the blame to a third party, in Coles, Essentia, in flock safety camera. For the law enforcement, well, they can just blame flock safety cameras now. And I think this is the real issue that people Another example that made the news was around automated data requests, where a person was wrongfully imprisoned for 18 months because of a missing underscore in their username. Imagine that. You have law enforcement and prosecutors going after a person and did not check that the username was correct or incorrect because of an automated data request that dropped an underscore. This kind of shift or removal of accountability and just saying, hey, this is because AI did this or automated system did this, is kind of crazy. And I think that this trend will only continue. And that's one of the biggest problems that I see in recent times with these kinds of news. And that's what it is, right? You have people in leadership position, people in positions where they make key decisions that affect people, real people, using a proxy to do that, whether it be AI or consultancies. And they don't need to take responsibility anymore to the public. They can just go and say, well, we have our scapegoat, we have this person to blame, it's no longer our problem. And I believe that that is one of the biggest challenges to the world that we live in today. This removal of responsibility, this insistence of pushing responsibility away. I think the only way to really recover from this is to hold people accountable, to hold people accountable to decisions that they make, so that they cannot just use a scapegoat to justify what they do. And in many regards, I think that this problem will only become more and more prevalent. It's not to say that people didn't use consulting companies before. They absolutely did. And in fact, that's why the big four consulting firms are so large. But I just think that in this day and age, it's just becoming even more and more pervasive to the extent that it's becoming normalized in a not so good way. So that's my thoughts. It'll be interesting to see how these things play out. We can only imagine that every single week there's going to be more and more examples of this. And well, hopefully things will change, but let's wait and see.